West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
A new poll shows nearly 3/4 of Republicans are ready to close the books on the January 6th insurrections. A new Quinnipiac poll shows 74% of Republicans say it's time to move on. That's compared to 84.
Wait, hold on a second. So let's see here. It's May 28th.
Yeah.
This is what? How many months? 4 months? 5 months after the insurrection? Mm-hmm. What if in, I'm wondering, Gene Robinson, what if in like January of 2002, Democrats said, you know what? We need to just move past 9/11.
Yeah. Just move past it. Nothing to see here. It's incredible. It's just another example of the sort of fantasy world, dystopian fantasy world that the Republican Party is living in now. And, they don't want to think about that because that was a bad thing for them and a bad thing for their guy who incited the whole thing, Donald Trump. And so let's just pretend it never happened. It's astonishing for
the tables
one
were
of our
turned,
two major political parties to have lost its mind to that extent.
Yeah. If the tables were turned, they'd be telling the truth and also pointing out how this weakens us around the world, especially our national security, a weakness from within that they could promulgate and grow. It's compared to 84% of Democrats and 54% of independents who say the events of that day should never be forgotten. That 74% was likely what was behind a marathon session in the Senate overnight as Republicans stalled a crucial vote on the January 6th commission. Republicans were on the Senate floor until just before 3 this morning, debating an unrelated bill to delay the vote. Now the vote isn't expected until possibly later today. 60 votes are needed for the independent January 6th commission to move forward. So far, only 3 Republicans, 3, have expressed their support. Senator Lisa Murkowski, the only Republican backing the January 6th commission bill as is, and she expressed her disappointment in her colleagues' attempts to block the vote.
It's important that there be a focus on the facts and on the truth, and that may be unsettling, but we need to understand that. We just can't pretend that nothing bad happened or that people just got too excitable. Something bad happened, and it's important to lay that out. I think there's more to be learned. I want to know more, and I want to know and I don't want to know. I don't want to know, but I need to know.
There's so much to find out, and there's so much misinformation out there that some of the misinformation is easily dismissed, where you have people saying on the Trump right that it was Antifa. It clearly was not Antifa. And none other than Kevin McCarthy screamed and swore at Donald Trump as the insurrection was going down, saying, this is not Antifa. What do you think, stupid? These are your people here. Yeah. These are your people here. So that lie continues to spread, of course, throughout the Trump right. And there are other lies. It was just really just sort of peaceful demonstrators, nothing to see here. The Ron Johnson claim, there was really nothing to be worried about, while police officers were being beaten and brutalized within an inch of their lives. So you have that part of it too. Mike Allen, what I don't really understand is, you and I both, we've been around the Hill long enough. We know that a lot of times leadership will say, hey, listen, Joe, you know what, would like to have your vote here. This is a vote of conscience. So you do what you want to do, but that happens a lot of times in votes like this. And certainly Mitch McConnell said that during impeachment. Vote of conscience, you do what you feel like you need to do. What I don't understand is what has changed. Why is Mitch McConnell, based on reporting, all the reporting I've seen, Mitch McConnell's telling Republicans, I need your vote. I need your vote. What is it about this commission that he fears? Why is it that he's telling, instead of just saying vote your conscience like he did on impeachment, why is he now doing everything short of demanding their support?
Joe, it's a little tough to compete with Zapruder baseball. But if you look at this, there's two things going on here. And, with Senator McConnell, he's thinking about one thing. He's thinking, how can I rebuild my majority? How am I going to recruit the candidates that I need to get back the Senate majority, looking ahead to next cycles? And so something that most of the Republicans that you served with and that we've covered over the years, this would seem like a no-brainer. You've pointed out again and again on the show why this commission is needed. But this is one of the ones where they're whipping and pushing as opposed to vote your conscience. And we have a little new reporting on possible fallout from this vote. So Senator Joe Manchin, everybody's trying to read his mind. And he's been very strong in saying that Republicans should be for this commission. We've talked to some Democrats who think that this expected vote by Republicans trying to kill this commission, that's a new wedge that Democrats can use with Manchin to say to him, you're being schooled, you're being played by Republicans. They are not voting, arguing in good faith here. This commission is proof of it. And because of that, you should soften your view on the filibuster, move toward a Senate where Democrats can get their way in a 50-50 Senate, Vice President Harris breaking the tie, instead of right now where you need 10 Republicans to get something real.
Yeah, and Joe Manchin's going to be hearing a lot of that, but he's been Sherman-esque in saying that he doesn't want to, quote, destroy the government by getting rid of the filibuster. I don't think. I think that's being a little melodramatic.
I don't think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Joe, at the time he said that, he's still holding out hope for some Republican movement. And so if you get no movement past that graphic that you showed, that's where there's an opening to say to Joe Manchin, look, this is a pipe dream. You're going to get Republicans on these big questions. Give it up. Let's pass things that we believe in and need to for our voters.
Yeah, Jonathan Lemire, I'm trying to remember who said this yesterday. I think it was Senator Bennett said nobody hates Donald Trump more than Mitch McConnell. He's probably right there. And so it leads me, obviously, if you looked at what Mitch McConnell said on January the 6th, if you saw what Mitch McConnell said about impeachment, do what you feel like you need to do on impeachment. If you saw what he said after his vote on impeachment, it's very clear he doesn't like Donald Trump. Anything he's doing is not to protect Donald Trump. I'm just wondering, again, for those who are trying to figure out why is the Republican leader in the Senate doing this, I'm just wondering if the whole thing is like, let's get Donald Trump behind us. I don't want to spend the next year and a half figuring out how much Donald Trump was laughing at the White House when he was seeing pictures of cops being beaten up with an American flag. I don't want to be, having to answer for Donald Trump not calling the National Guard in fast enough. Just, Republicans having to answer that question day in and day out as they move through 2021 and into 2022, because this would go into 2022, regardless of what the legislation says, because that a lot of people being subpoenaed would fight those subpoenas.
Right. And as much as Senator McConnell may dislike Donald Trump, he likes more the idea of being Senate Majority Leader again. And that's what he's making a calculation here. He's trying to win. He thinks this is best for the Republicans in the Senate. This is the best move for his caucus because of exactly what you said, Joe, that he doesn't want this to turn into a months-long, potentially years-long odyssey with more revelations, keeping January 6th in the news, being more damaging. We have seen this just from that date itself, that every time we see a new piece of video, every time we hear from a new witness, including in a test we heard yesterday from the mother of the Capitol police officer who was killed there. It is so heart-wrenching. It's such a difficult day. Those are not headlines that are good for the Republicans, who had senators object to the election results. And, of course, that violence was incited by the former president. So that's the calculation McConnell has made to try to block this, to try to move forward. We know Speaker Pelosi, as we've been discussing on the show for weeks now, has other options. It could be a select committee, could be the power of the subpoena. But the Republicans' objections to this is what led to last night when Senator Ron Johnson, who, as you mentioned, is the one who said he'd be far more worried if it was Black Lives Matter protesters storming the Capitol as opposed to this pro-Trump riot. He's the one who held up the proceedings, didn't get to votes on things like China and other measures, including January 6th, because he was trying to pull a stunt about the border wall. So the Republicans, again, they're taking the orders from Mitch McConnell, but really it all exists under the shadow of Donald Trump. That's still what they're concerned about because of the grip he has on the party.
It is Friday, the 28th of May of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunnar the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the Diner of Life. Well, Memorial Day weekend is upon us, and they say it's a long weekend. Well, let's hope so. For some, it starts right now, or maybe even earlier. And it's going to end later for some, too. Good for you. We're still in a pandemic, and after more than 600,000 people dead, it looks like the ghouls want to try to kill more. What is up with that? I took my elderly mom to the lumberyard, the hardware store, the general hardware store. And apparently masks are optional now, even though our county is one of the counties that leads the nation in new infections. Okay. One guy walked in and says, "Do I have to wear this? I'm so over this." Well, we all are. Put it on, okay? He's walking around without one. All right. People want to live their lives. I just don't want to, follow it. Because wherever it leads doesn't look like it's going to be very nice. So we still have that problem. And fortunately for some of us, we have gotten the vaccinations, the full series in some cases. I got my Pfizer shot. I'm feeling pretty good. Just that I'm not willing to go out there, and just willy-nilly maybe pick something up and bring it back. Who knows? I don't know. Can that happen? At the very least, I like to think I'm honoring my mom's already immune-compromised system. And she should be wearing a mask anyway, even before all of this conflagration occurred. And on a side note, because of most of us who decided, it's not stupid to wash your hands, wear a mask, and socially distance, the instances of flu, the cases of flu have dropped so dramatically. I mean, we're talking in the hundreds for the whole nation. I might be totally wrong on that number, but it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what it was before the pandemic. That says something right there. So when people say, none of this works, well, it sure does look like it's hitting the impact of the flu. So everybody's got their own excuse for not being a good neighbor. And they're really mean about it, too. So, and just remember, make a joke about a Nazi, you are the bully in today's new a-go-go world. At least on certain social media platforms run by a Harvard dropout who had a rate-a-babe computer site. Weaponized it. Now what? Now look at what's happened. Yikes. You never know. You just never know. Well, so much news ahead of us. So much news coming upon us. There's something I just want to know. What is the GOP trying to hide? At the top, yeah, that was Joe and Mika and friends breaking down how the GOP delayed the vote last night on the January 6th commission. Oh, Gunner the English Bulldog, my snoozing sous chef, he is working really hard. Can you hear? I love him so. Anyway, up till 3 on the East Coast, delaying a vote on, well, the only insurrection that the United States has ever experienced where the Capitol was breached. They didn't even do that during the Civil War. That's how bad it was. And they're going to poo-poo it and say, oh, well, it was just a guided tour. Yeah, it was a guided tour. And they were being guided by the insurgents inside the Capitol itself, who are electeds, and maybe even some of their staff and their friends. Wouldn't you want to find out instead of just leaving it up to conjecture? Wouldn't that be nice? Even a dead Capitol police officer's mom would like to know, and they shunned her. Well, I thought, if they can just make up conspiracy stories about the Sandy Hook parents, are you really thinking that they're going to show some compassion to the mother of a dead Capitol police officer? Come on. The parents of 26, the parents of how many dead 6-year-olds? 26 were dead, but some were teachers, so enough. 20 kids, 5, 6, 7-year-olds dead, mutilated, torn apart by automatic weapon, military-grade fire. And they made up conspiracies about that and ran and campaigned and raised funds on that. So, compassion? No, not. Only if it makes money. It's very transactional on that side, isn't it? Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we begin at least this part of Blue Moon Spirits Fridays? Well, it turns out the scandal-ridden GOP-led Arizona election audit is really unpopular with the voters there. That's why they don't want them to vote, because they're not stopping. The EPA is giving power to protect water sources back to the state and tribal leaders. Well, that's good. It's another rollback of a Trump-era regulation that pretty much says, here, grift all you want. And Christine Wormuth was confirmed unanimously by the Senate to be the first female Secretary of the Army. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where European privacy groups filed a legal challenge against facial recognition firm Clearview. And in what has been described as a key step in Europe's effort to shift away from fossil fuels to renewable energy, Germany and Norway flipped on the switch to Nordlink. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. If you would go to our homepage at netrootsradio.com, and by the way, there's a player right there, a live player. There's a button right there. Go ahead, press it. You'll hear things. You will, if you have a sound card. Anyway, go to that homepage at netrootsradio.com, and after you've turned on the player, if you so desire, scroll down to the bottom, and near the bottom of the homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln because you need a monitor, okay? And congratulations to Kelly for, getting some employment in the real world, because everybody needs to pay bills now, don't they? They do. Thank you, Kelly, for everything you do here at Netroots Radio. If you would then take a look across the page while you're at or near the bottom of the homepage at netrootsradio.com, there is that Patreon site. And if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to spend or send those funds our way once a month, that's how we are able to pay our bills. So we dig into our own wallets to be able to sustain this effort at resistance against the Nazi takeover of America. We've been doing this resistance for 10 years, and I was a bit loath to call it a Nazi takeover when we first started, but look where we are. Anyway, your contribution or patronage helps us pay our bills and fly under the radar and continue this decade-long effort at stopping the Nazi takeover of America, because that's what it's become. And no, not in America. Maybe somewhere else, but not here. We're not going to allow it. Okay. Anyway, thank you for your generosity. Like I said, 10 years, 24/7, 365. And it's because of folks like you, and we are very appreciative. Even Gunner the English Bulldog, the snoozing sous chef. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Just go to @Netroots Radio. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Hey, that's me. I post the show notes and links diary. When you say diary, you know it's Daily Co's. It will not be a story, ever. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I put that on Twitter and other social media platforms, and the one I'm not able to do until about the 18th of June. Or maybe a day after. We'll see how that works. Anyway, you can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And I would suggest, please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, it's Friday. I'm not dipping into the French 77s yet. It's much, much too early. Actually, that's just an affectation. I hardly ever drink anymore. Most of my alcohol goes into food. I'm not putting the Saint-Germain into my food, please. It's too expensive. But, I have all the makings, all the fixins to make the best and most balanced cocktail in the history of cocktailing, the French 77. But I assure you, all of this, bombast, ranting, and bellowing humor is totally organic, or maybe from lack of sleep. We don't know. All right, let's get into this first offering here. Have I? No, I guess I haven't. I've not opened up this and put it into a tab yet, but I am now. So it comes out of the American Independent, and I suspect it's out of the Associated Press. Oh, no, Emily Singer from the American Independent brings this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A majority of likely voters in Arizona oppose the audit state Senate Republicans forced on some 2.1 million ballots cast in the state's 2020 presidential elections, according to a poll released yesterday, Thursday, by a GOP consulting firm in the state. A fact Republican analysts say could be problematic for the party in the coming midterm elections. The poll found 55% of voters do not support the hand recount of some 2.1 million ballots in Maricopa County, the state's largest. Democrats overwhelmingly oppose it, but so do 68% of unaffiliated voters. What's more, 44.5% of likely voters say they would be less likely to vote for a candidate who supported the audit. And that was leading Chuck Coughlin, a Republican who is the president and CEO of the firm that conducted the poll, to say it proves the audit is a political liability for the GOP. While it is to be expected that they would receive significant opposition from Democrats, this audit makes them face headwinds among independent and unaffiliated voters as well, Coughlin said of the Republicans who forced the audit in the first place. As we have said before, never run the last election, run the election you are in now. This issue is an electoral cul-de-sac. This spells trouble for Republicans in 2022. Do tell. The poll results come as bad news continues to plague the audit, which was forced by Republican state senators and is being run by a Donald Trump-supporting conspiracy theorist who was involved in a faked effort to overturn the election. Election experts who witnessed the counting called the audit a mismanaged mess, condemning the conspiracy-fueled exercise as one meant simply to sow doubt in the election result rather than actually audit the vote. Sounds like a Russian plot made up by a Russian mobster, doesn't it? Meanwhile, Secretary of State Katie Hobbs said the audit's shoddy security protocols compromised millions of dollars worth of election equipment, and she advised Maricopa County election officials that they must now purchase new machines. The Department of Justice said the entire audit may be in violation of federal election law, as ballots are not supposed to go to outside contractors this soon after an election. In fact, even some GOP lawmakers in the state have come out to say the audit is an embarrassment that needs to stop, and that it makes Republicans look like idiots. Well, that's not hard. Yet Republicans are pressing on in their quest to scrounge up evidence for Trump's voter fraud lies. CNN interviewed State President Karen Fann, whose lawsuit forced the audit in the first place, who stood by the audit despite the problems, and continued to promote lies about dead people voting. 2 previous audits conducted in the state found no evidence of Fann's claims. Usually when people are dead, they're dead. All these terrible stories of mass shootings like that one in San Jose, which it turns out that guy was a full-blown racist. And he got his guns, at least a lot of the ammunition, illegally and skirted the gun laws to be able to amass the weaponry he had. And was a full-blown racist and apparently was under orders to have an interview about it on the day. With that sort of bad news, I just wonder what other ideologies might have held. Yeah, one can only wonder. With that bad news and the bad news of Mitch McConnell continuing his Moscow Mitch shtick. Yeah, doing it quite well and effectively, too, you little Moscow Mitch. And all the other bad news that seems to be befalling us on this Memorial Day weekend, I thought it would be good to call some more uplifting stories. And what's more uplifting than another rollback of a Trump edict? Yeah, the Associated Press, by way of the American Independent, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. In the latest reversal of a Trump-era policy, the EPA is restoring a rule that grants states and Native American tribes authority to block pipelines and other energy projects that can pollute rivers, streams, and other waterways. A provision of the Federal Clean Water Act gives states and tribes power to block federal projects that could harm lakes, streams, and rivers and wetlands within their borders. But the Trump administration curtailed that review power after complaints from Republican members of Congress and the fossil fuel industry that state officials had used the permitting process to stop new energy projects. Like I say, if you're down to pulverizing rock about a mile down into the ground to release microscopic bubbles of gas that are trapped in solid rock, maybe you should move on to another energy source. The Trump administration said its actions would advance Donald Trump's goal of fast-track energy projects such as oil and natural gas pipelines. Washington State blocked construction of a coal export terminal in 2017, saying there were too many major harmful effects, including air pollution, rail safety, and vehicle traffic, while New York regulators stopped a natural gas pipeline, saying it failed to meet standards to protect streams, wetlands, and other water resources. In a statement to the Associated Press, EPA Administrator Michael Regan said the nation has serious water challenges to address. Yeah, maybe stop selling it to DeSantis, huh? Adding that he will not hesitate to correct decisions that weaken the authority of states and tribes to protect their waters. And when I say stop selling water to DeSantis and Nestle and Coca-Cola and all the others, I'm serious. Regan vowed to work with state, tribal, and local officials to protect clean water while encouraging sustainable economic development and vibrant communities. Well, you can have all of that with clean water. Final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays also comes from the Associated Press by way of the American Independent. Well, it looks like Christine Wormuth was confirmed unanimously by the Senate yesterday, Thursday, to be the first female Secretary of the Army. Now, this is after Ted Cruz had gone on about, how emasculated our military is compared to the Ruskies. Ruskies? I'm sorry. That's my shorthand for Vlad's troops. Okay. Anyway. Apparently, even Ted Cruz voted for someone that he knows can kick his ass. Another woman that can kick his ass. He voted for her. So that's good. Well, Wormuth, who led President Joe Biden's transition team at the Pentagon, got an overwhelmingly warm reception from members of the Senate Armed Services Committee during a hearing this month. Her confirmation sets her up as one of the more powerful officials in a defense establishment long dominated by men. You mean like forever? She is the second woman named to a top Pentagon role by Biden. The Deputy Secretary of Defense is Kathleen Hicks. During her hearing, many of the senators pressed Wormuth on a range of personal issues that have plagued the Army, ranging from sexual assault and racial tensions to strains on a force that has been in combat in multiple war zones for the last 2 decades. And you better not blame the Democrats for that, please. Some you might. But still, the reason we are in these wars is because of the neocons. Let's not forget that. They'd like you to, though. The Army's handling of sexual assaults and other violence has come under significant scrutiny in the aftermath of a series of crimes, including murders and suicides last year at Fort Hood, Texas. A review panel found that military leaders at the post were not adequately dealing with high rates of sexual assault and harassment and were utterly neglecting the sexual assault prevention program. Wormuth told the Senate Armed Services Committee that she was angry and frustrated by the failures at Fort Hood, and she said the Army needs to put quite a bit of focus on improving the command climate all the way down to the lower levels so that younger soldiers feel safe and are able to make complaints if needed. Wormuth has a long history of service in the Pentagon on a variety of national security issues. She served as the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy and the Senior Director for Defense Policy at the NSC during the Obama administration and held other Defense Department positions. She has previously served as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Homeland Defense. Her most recent job was as Director of the International Security and Defense Policy Center at the RAND Corporation, a federally funded think tank. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. Yes, we will. And we'll finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Smoldering. It can be hard to think of movie stars as real people with real problems that shape what we see of their lives, but they are. Those Who Want Me Dead is here because Angelina Jolie liked the project, and she liked it because it fit where she's at right now. For the past few years, she's been mostly off camera. She's done voice work, she's directed, which she likes, but now she's on screen again. Why? Because she's getting divorced and is dealing with custody issues, and she doesn't have the time that directing requires, hence this movie and this particular movie. In Those Who Want Me Dead, Jolie plays Hannah, a smoke jumper, a firefighter who parachutes into wildfires, who no longer jumps and is healing her emotional wounds in a watchtower. It's there that she sees a young boy stumble out of the forest. He's being chased by killers, and now so is she. So it's a thriller, it's a survival story, there's action, but Jolie doesn't have to learn martial arts. She doesn't have to train. She just has to get beaten up, which is a thing these days. Have you noticed? So many movies and shows where characters go through them bloodied, bruised, and otherwise physically wounded. What is that about? Anyway, Jolie also wanted a chance to work with actor-turned-screenwriter, Socorro Yellowstone, screenwriter-turned-director, Taylor Sheridan. And if her co-stars are to be believed, Jolie is not the only one who appreciates Sheridan's affinity for nouveau westerns that have some grit and a focus on strong relationships. Speaking of relationships, not only does Jolie not have to be superhuman here, she also doesn't have to be super mom. Hannah is tough with her child charge, which Jolie says was a new character direction for her, which I find notable because I have long said one of the joys of Maleficent was watching Angelina Jolie, who loves children, play someone who tries not to fall in love with a child and fails. Now, you might expect Those Who Want Me Dead to be this big, high-powered star vehicle action film. That's not what it is. It's more this ensemble-like, even-paced thriller. It would be a quiet movie if they hadn't burned down a forest to make it. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Bats rely on echolocation to navigate the night skies and to chase down and capture even erratically moving prey. But even more impressive than their aerial acrobatics are the mental gymnastics bats must be performing to translate the time it takes for their echoed calls to return into a distance to their target. Now, those pings would not normally be audible to our human ears, but we slowed them down so you can hear how a bat closes in on an object. Now, a new study shows that to get a leg up, or a wing up, on the necessary navigational calculations, bats have an innate sense of the speed of sound. The work appears in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences.
It has always been assumed that bats use the speed of sound in order to assess distance. So basically their brains measure time, and then if they know the speed of sound, they can assess the distance to a target using it.
Yossi Yavel of Tel Aviv University.
But this assumes that they know the speed of sound, and this was never actually tested.
That's where the helium comes in.
One of the things we did is we took pups that were actually never exposed to regular air, and we reared them in an environment that is enriched in helium in order to see whether they will learn a new speed of sound.
Because helium is lighter than air, sound travels faster in a helium-enriched medium, which means their echolocation sounds would come back faster, making objects seem closer than they really are. Now, if bats learn to estimate distances based on the speed of sound they experience growing up, pups raised in the presence of helium, when they're later placed in a chamber of dense, regular air, should act like targets are farther away, which means their echolocation pings should be longer and spaced farther apart than they were in the heliox mix, and longer and farther apart than the echolocation calls of pups that were raised in regular air and are therefore used to its density. By the same logic, the air pups should mistake targets in heliox as closer than they are and use echolocation pings that are shorter and more tightly spaced.
We saw none of these.
Eran Amichai, now a postdoc at Dartmouth College, worked with these befuddled bats as a student in Yovel's lab.
They used the same values and they displayed the same sensory error no matter where they were born and raised. So that tells us it's basically innate.
In other words, in the heliox mix, all the pups acted as if their target was closer than it was, which means they all came to the table with an innate feel for the speed of sound, based on a world filled with regular air. And the same was true of adult bats, which also couldn't adjust their echolocation behavior to accommodate different concentrations of helium.
They are unable to relearn a new reference to the speed of sound, and that tells us that this is fixed and not flexible.
This lack of flexibility might seem like a liability, especially because the speed at which sound travels can sometimes vary by a few %, depending on air temperature and humidity. But Yovel hypothesizes that coming into the world with a fixed notion of the speed of sound is probably a plus.
Many of these bats, they're born in summer and they have to very quickly start flying and foraging independently. And therefore, it's really important that they acquire their sensory, their echolocation sensing system abilities very, very rapidly. And therefore, it might be beneficial to have an innate reference, and rather than something that you have to learn and might take time and you might learn and err some value.
Especially if you find yourself in a heliox chamber in a certain lab in Tel Aviv. For Scientific Americans, 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Woody Guthrie had a lot to say about the greed of bankers who made crop loans at usurious interest rates to hardscrabble farmers, then foreclosed on them when they couldn't pay off the loans, leaving thousands of farm families homeless. Woody mocked them with a sarcastic anthem singing, "I'm a jolly banker am I." He also penned a stinging verse about their thievery. Some will rob you with a 6-gun, some with a fountain pen. But even this populist poet of the people would be astonished by the shameless grabbiness of today's farm lenders. After decades of systemic, scandalous discrimination by bankers against black and other minority farmers, The Biden administration is now moving to pay off the onerous level of long-term bank debt that has shackled these good farmers, thus giving them a fair shot at getting ahead. Oh no, squawked the American Bankers Association and other groups of ag lenders. Why? After all, they'd be getting back the money they had loaned out. Yes, say the fountain pens, but we would lose the interest payments each of those farmers would have had to send to us over the months ahead. We want American taxpayers to cover the total interest income we would have gotten from gouging Black, Latino, Native, and other minority farmers. They insist that their profits and the financial interests of their rich investors must take priority over the needs of a bunch of non-white dirt farmers. Wait, the bankers' greed intensifies. If the government doesn't fully compensate them for their so-called lost interest income, the ag lenders, backed by Wall Street barons, are openly threatening that they will cut off future loans to farmers and ranchers of color. This is Jim Hightower saying so. The jolly bankers' drumbeat of rank discrimination keeps pounding. To help stop it, connect with the National Black Farmers Association, blackfarmers.org. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, now live streaming on Facebook from the Chat and Chew Cafe. So grab a libation, pull up a virtual chair, and join our freewheeling conversations with political mavericks, musical agitators, and kick-ass grassroots groups. The Lowdown Happy Hour will connect you to good trouble activists who are building people power across America. Get the lowdown at hightowerlowdown.org.
This Civil Liberties Minute is about 3 words uttered just over a year ago that may change the world. I'm Bill Newman. Those 3 words were, I can't breathe. The last words spoken by George Floyd on May 25, 2020, as Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin pushed his knee into his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds and murdered him. The murder of George Floyd sparked protests across the country and the world, and has caused a national reckoning about race, and has engendered a national movement to reimagine public safety and policing. Of course, much hasn't changed. Black people are still 3 times more likely to be killed by a cop than white people, even though blacks are far less likely to be carrying a weapon. And Congress has yet to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act that would prohibit chokeholds and require accountability. And, of course, the murder of George Floyd is just one of many police killings. Remember Eric Garner in New York, Michael Brown in Ferguson, and Tamir Rice in Cleveland, Laquan McDonald in Chicago, and Breonna Taylor in Louisville, and Dante Wright in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. This list goes on and on. And so does the work we collectively must do to dramatically reform criminal justice and policing. We should press forward on this work with determination and resolve, in their names and in their honor. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1863. That was the day the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry marched through the streets of Boston in a farewell parade and then boarded ships headed for Beaufort, South Carolina. Thousands lined the streets for the send-off, including prominent abolitionists William Lloyd Garrison, Wendell Phillips, and Frederick Douglass. It was the first black regiment organized to fight in the Civil War. Abolitionists had wrestled with Lincoln and others that the Civil War wasn't just about preventing national disintegration, but about ending the slave labor system. They were emphatic that slaves and free black men had a right and a vested interest in fighting for their freedoms and the freedoms of their families. Finally, the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 codified that demand as it abolished the slave system. The Union Army began accepting black enlistees and embarked on recruitment campaigns to enlist future black soldiers. By May, over 1,000 black men had enlisted from 24 states. Others came from as far away as Canada and the Caribbean. Fathers and sons enlisted together. The Union Army was far from free from its own anti-black prejudices. Secretary of War Edward Stanton determined white officers would lead all black regiments. Nonetheless, black enlisted men were trained, armed, and ready to fight. A young Colonel Robert Gould Shaw was put in charge of the regiment. Though Shaw and hundreds of troops would soon be killed in the Battle of Fort Wagner, the regiment forced the Confederacy to abandon the fort altogether. The Swamp Angels, as they were called, would continue to exact justice throughout the South for the duration of the war. They served as a model for other black regiments whose fighting proved decisive for victory. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2. Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting to be a tad warmer today. Well, quite a bit more than a tad, actually. Expecting to be in the low 80s, and we'll be inching up to 3-digit temperatures by, Tuesday or so. Something to look forward to here in Southern Oregon. Yes, so we'll be quite warm. My Chrome seems to be lagging here a little bit. So plentiful sunshine with winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. A few passing clouds tonight with lows in the upper 40s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy tomorrow, Saturday, with highs bumping 90, which means it'll be a tad warmer than that here at the mothership. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Now, I made a reference to my county here in Southern Oregon being one of those counties leading the nation in new infections, and it looks like we have another spike. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now has gone to 11,194. Our confirmed deceased is at 143. No one wants to wear a mask. Everybody wants to get rid of Kate Brown. And then they want to be part of Greater Idaho, which is just a nice way of saying that they're still fighting the Civil War because they are Southern secessionists. Please, I know this is the weather. Anyway, it looks like grass pollen is very high. Yes, including the coronavirus infections. But the air quality index is good for the region at 28 parts per million, and the daytime UV index remains very high, and it remains at 9. That's scary. Put on the SP50 or more if you have it. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.26 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 82%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 66 and partly cloudy. Paris is 74 and sunny. Rome is 80 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 70 degrees and fair. Kabul is 76 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 82 and partly cloudy. It looks like Tokyo is 70 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 51 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 and mostly cloudy with a fog advisory on the bay. And New York, New York is 63 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world. Brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world.
Kelvin Chan of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Privacy campaign groups filed legal complaints yesterday, Thursday, with European regulators against Clearview AI, alleging the facial recognition technology it provides to law enforcement agencies and businesses breaches stringent European Union privacy rules. 4 groups complained to data protection authorities in France, Austria, Greece, Italy, and the UK about Clearview's practices. They say the company stockpiled biometric data on more than 3 billion with a B people without their knowledge or permission by scraping their images from websites. The complaints say Clearview did not have any legal basis to collect and process this data under the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, which covers facial image data. Britain adopted its own version of the EU privacy rules after it left the bloc. Clearview AI has never had any contacts with any EU customer and is not currently available to EU customers, CEO Han Ton-that said in a statement. News of Clearview's stockpile, first reported by the New York Times, raised concerns that the type of surveillance seen in China could happen in Western democracies. Could happen? Privacy International said European data protection laws clearly outline the purposes for which companies can use personal data. Extracting our unique facial features or even sharing them with the police and other companies goes far beyond what we could ever expect as online users, the London-based Privacy International legal officer said. Italy's Hermes Center for Transparency and Digital Human Rights, Greece's Homo Digitalis, and Austria's NOIB were also part of the challenge. The complaints are partly based on requests individuals can file to see what data a company holds on them. Ton-that said Clearview voluntarily processed the request, which only contained publicly available information, like the thousands of others we have processed. Oh, only thousands.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Frank Jordans of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Germany and Norway inaugurated a new undersea cable that directly links the two countries' electricity networks, a project that has been described as a key step in Europe's effort to shift away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. The $2.4 billion project called Nordlink will allow Germany to export excess electricity from its wind parks to Norway, effectively banking it in Nordic nations' vast hydropower reservoirs. During periods of little wind, electricity can be released from Norwegian reservoirs again to meet German demand. We're setting a milestone for the modern energy supply in Europe, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said during a virtual ceremony to officially switch on the power link. The new system could help lower the price of electricity in Germany, which is relatively high compared to other European countries. oil-rich Norway meets almost all of its electricity needs using renewable sources, and electricity from its hydropower facilities is comparatively cheap. By tapping into the Norwegian grid, Germany can avoid building costly standby power plants of its own. Well, that sounds like something we should do. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on. And we will meet up on Monday, yes sirree, on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up on a holiday on Monday. That's right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.